Hello everybody, welcome to Totally Tabled. My name is Shaggy, and today I'm running down my top 10 next step solo board games for new gamers. This is a bit of a companion list to an old video I did about 9 months ago, the top 10 simple solo games for new gamers. If you haven't watched that one, go check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. If you've tried a bunch of those games and you're looking for something that is just a little bit more complex, has a little bit more going on, a little bit more meat on the bones, then this is the list for you. These are still going to be relatively simple games, but I just think the complexity is just that next step up. These are games that I would consider to be medium light on sort of the complexity scale. But that's enough preamble, let's just jump right into the list. My number 10 is Rove. This is a solo-only 18-card micro game from Button Shy Games. This is the same publisher that did Sprawlopolis, which was on the original list. I'm a fan of their wallet games, and I actually think Rove is my favorite. In this one, you have 6 cards in the middle of the table, and each card can sort of move in a different way. And you're just trying to move them around, slide them around, sort of like a slide puzzle, in order to get them in very specific configurations that match these goal cards. But you have these hands of cards which give you action points to spend to move the cards around. And there's also extra little goals on those cards where if you happen to be in that configuration when you play the card, you'll get extra movement points. And you need to complete the goals in order to get more of those cards, because if you run out of those movement cards, then you lose. It's extremely puzzly, even more than it first appears to be, because some of the cards move in fairly ridiculous ways, right? Some of them can just move one step. Sometimes they push the other cards as they move. Sometimes they have to jump over a card in order to move. And so it gets very complicated very quickly. Also, each of the cards has a one-time special ability on it that you can use at any time just by flipping over the card. And so, you'll figure out how to make the shape in like 3 moves, but if you stare at it long enough, there's probably a way to do it in 2, right? And that's great because when you figure out a clever way of doing something, it feels really satisfying. The fact that it accomplishes that with so few cards with such a small footprint. There's also some really great expansions that you can add that mix up the gameplay quite a bit. So if you're into puzzly games, you like that slide puzzle kind of concept, the spatial relationships, then yeah, you should definitely check out Rove. Number 9 is Resist. This is another solitaire card game, only with a few more than 18 cards. In it, we play as the Spanish Maquis after the Spanish Civil War, and you're using your fighters to try to complete these missions. So you can have a hand of fighter cards, and each one has 2 sides, has their revealed side and their hidden side. And each side has a different special ability. Usually the revealed side is stronger. And you're going to decide, you're going to pick one of these missions and you're going to decide for each one of your fighters whether you're going to play them on their hidden side or you can put them on their revealed side, which will give you a more powerful special ability, but it means that they're going to be discarded out of the game after that round. If you keep them on their hidden side, then you just discard them to your discard pile and you'll get to use them again later in the game. And that's really the main decision you're making. You're trying to figure out the best way to play these fighters, use their special abilities, strategically decide when to reveal them to get rid of them and when to keep them hidden so you can keep using them. It's really fascinating how it works. There's a lot of really clever stuff here, and I find the game quite challenging. There's also a bunch of scenarios in the book and even a little sort of mini campaign that you can play through. I highly recommend this one. I've actually done a full playthrough. I've done a full playthrough of Rove as well. I'll put links in the descriptions for any of the games that are on this list that I've done playthroughs for. But yeah, you should really go check that one out. There's a lot of game in a small package here, so that is Resist. Number 8 is Cartographers Heroes. This is a very popular roll and write of the flip and write variety. And in the previous list, I mentioned Avenue, which was another flip and write. And I basically said, hey, you can throw in any roll and write / flip and write you want. They tend to be relatively simple and make for good games when you're first starting out. I put Cartographer Heroes here on this list because I find that it's a little bit more complicated. There's just a few more rules, a little bit more going on. This is definitely one of my favorite roll and writes just because of, well, one, the theme. I love drawing out your map, using the different colored pencils and, and drawing little trees for the forests and, making the little farmlands and things. Feels really thematic. It feels like you are a cartographer. But I really love just trying to plan for the different scoring conditions, dealing with where to put the monsters. And then in the Cartographers Heroes, you also get little heroes that you can put out to sort of fight off the monsters a little bit. I also like all the different maps that each have their own little twists to the gameplay. I think that works really well. And it works great whether you're playing solo or in a big group. There's a reason why this one is incredibly popular, and I highly recommend it as well. That's Cartographers Heroes. Number 7 is Bullet Heart. This game is really unique because the multiplayer is so different than the solo. In multiplayer, you have this real-time thing going on. You're sending these tokens out to the other players. In the solo, they abandon the real time, and it just becomes this really fun, puzzly experience. In the game, you are drawing tokens out of a bag, and you're placing them into the corresponding columns, and you don't want the tokens to reach the bottom, because if they do, then you get damaged. So you have to spend energy to manipulate the chips to get them into specific shapes, depending on the cards that you have, which lets you then remove the tokens from the board. And you have a limited amount of energy, and you're just trying to survive. You're just trying to get through all the chips in your bag without taking damage. And then each round you add more chips into the bag, and you just see how many rounds you can survive. I just love the puzzle here, and as silly as it sounds, drawing tokens out of a bag is really fun. And there's a lot of replayability here because each character that you play has a special ability and has a unique deck of cards. So they really have their own unique play style. And there's even a different solo mode where you're actually battling a boss. So there's just a ton of replayability here, and it's all just a ton of fun. So that's my number 7, Bullet Heart. Number 6 is Maquis. This is a small box solo only game where you are taking your characters, your worker meeples, and you are placing them throughout the city. Each of the different locations lets you get different resources or do different actions. And to complete the game, you're just trying to complete these missions. The twist here is that as you're placing your workers out, you're going to need to be able to trace a path back to your hideout. These police meeples are going to be randomly placed throughout the city as well. So you have to be careful that they don't surround one of your pieces, because if they can't make it back to the hideout, you lose them for the rest of the game. It's a really clever system, very simple, but it makes for some interesting decisions and moments of push your luck and tension. There's also these areas where you're able to sort of build your own locations, and you have a bunch to choose from. So making sure that you get the right location, leveraging that, it's all very clever, and there's a ton of different missions, and setup and gameplay are very quick, and so this one hits the table a lot. That's my number 6, Maquis. Number 5 is Horrified. This is a cooperative pick up and deliver style game that plays great multiplayer, plays great solo, really any player count. And it's got this great theme of the classic universal monsters, and they're wandering around the city creating havoc, and you're moving around collecting items and taking them to specific locations depending on what monster you're facing. But there's also these citizens that pop up on the board, and you need to escort them to, a location that they need to go to, protect them from the different monsters that'll be coming after them. And there's cards you can play that give you special abilities. It's real simple, but it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of tension that can develop. And the cool thing is you can really adjust the difficulty of this one simply by adjusting how many monsters you play against. So you could just play against 2 to have sort of an easier game, or you could play up to 4 and have a lot going on and a lot more danger on the board. It's easy to see why this is such a popular family game. That's number 5, Horrified. Number 4 is Marvel United. There are two base boxes, Marvel United and Marvel United X-Men, which is being shown here. Either one will work. They're both very simple cooperative systems. You're going to take 3 heroes and then choose one of like 3 or 4 villains to face off against. You then put out like 6 locations in a circle, and you're going to use each hero's unique small deck of cards in order to take actions. You just play a card, and that's going to let you move around the map, save victims, defeat the henchmen that are out there. And you're just trying to complete enough missions so that you can then go after the main boss, hit them enough times, and win the game. The really cool trick here is that when you play a card, you get to do the actions on your card and the previous one. So there can be a lot of cooperation between the different heroes. You can sort of set up the next hero to do something. It plays great solo or cooperative, and there's just a ton of stuff out there. If you want to go beyond the base box, there's a ton of expansions, pretty much every Marvel superhero you can imagine. And a lot of the expansions add a little bit of complexity, add some different rules and some different mechanisms on top of what is a really solid and fun base system that will work for families or even seasoned gamers. And it plays really quick. These sessions are under an hour. Really recommend this one. The more I've played it, the more I've loved it. So that's my number 4, Marvel United. Number 3 is Friday. This is a small box solo-only deck builder that is quite old at this point, but still feels fresh even today. It has this ingenious system that you would think would have been copied by hundreds of board games at this point, but that really just hasn't happened. It still feels unique. So like every deck builder, you have a starting hand of cards which are bad, and you're going to flip over 2 cards from like a challenge deck. You're going to pick one, and you're going to be presented with a challenge that you have to try to overcome. Top part of the card is going to show you how many cards you get to play from your deck to try to meet the challenge, and the value that you have to reach in order to succeed. So you flip over that number of cards, and you just sort of add up your values. The problem is a lot of your cards in your starting deck are negatives. And so you're going to fail a lot of these challenges. And when you fail, you lose the difference from your value to the challenge's value. You lose that from your health. So you have these tokens that represent your health, and if you lose all of them, you lose. But when you lose health, you get to cull cards from your deck. So failing is actually how you get better, how you get those really bad cards out of your deck. And when you succeed at the challenges, you get to flip the card and you get a better card into your deck. So that's how you deck build, by succeeding in these challenges. But it's important to fail. Thematically, you're Robinson Crusoe and you're learning how to survive on the island by failing. It's this really great balance where sometimes you want to fail a challenge just so you can get rid of those bad cards, but you got to bring yourself to sort of the brink of death and then hope that your deck gets good enough so that you can bring yourself back and succeed. It's really challenging. Whatever the trick is with this one, I haven't learned it because I always have a really hard time winning this one. I find it really challenging, but it's so much fun for what is just essentially a shuffled deck of cards. This game has just been an evergreen for me. I play it all the time, even today. So I consider this one to just be a must-play classic. That's my number 3, Friday. Number 2 is the opposite of a classic. It just came out, and that is Heat, Pedal to the Metal. In fact, the time of this recording, I just did a playthrough for it. This is a pure racing game that you can play up to 6 players. But it includes a fantastic solo mode where you're able to easily control 5 other AI racers to turn this into a fantastic solo game. And one that is simple enough that you can definitely play it as a next step sort of a game. This uses a really clever card cycling system where you have a hand of movement cards, but you also have these heat cards. They kind of go in their own little discard pile, and then you spend them in order to do cool stuff, like go a little bit faster, draw an extra card, things like that. The problem is when you spend the heat, it goes into your hand, into your deck. And when it's in your hand, it's just clogging it up. It's of no value. You have to use cooldown effects in order to get it out of your hand back into its own discard pile where you can then spend it again to do cool stuff. So you're constantly managing this heat, right? Speeding up, using the heat, and then having to slow down in order to cool down to get rid of the heat so you can use it again. And you're trying to time those cycles with the track that you're on and these corners, because as you're going around these corners, you have to be careful not to go too fast or you'll be forced to spend a bunch of heat. And if you don't have the heat to spend, then you can crash. There's also really cool slipstreaming rules, so you're trying to like end your movement right behind other cars so you can sort of slipstream ahead of them. Solo racing games are rare, especially pure racing games. And Heat has quickly become my favorite racing game of all time. You should definitely check it out. It's my number 2, Heat. And my number 1 next step solo game is Coffee Roaster. Look, this game has just charmed me. Your mileage may vary. It probably shouldn't be at number 1, but I just can't deny how much fun I have with this game. I'm charmed by the artwork. I'm charmed by the theme of making coffee. And I'm just charmed by the gameplay. This is a solo-only bag builder, and it works a little bit like a deck building game. You have these chips in the bag that you start with, and most of them are like unroasted beans, 0 value. And every round you're going to draw a certain number of them out of the bag, and then you're going to roast them. You're going to improve their numbers. Then you're going to toss them back in the bag, and you're just going to do it again. And you're going to keep improving the bag in this way, using different abilities to remove bad stuff that might be in there, or add different flavorings, right? Improving the aroma or the acidity or whatever, trying to get the bag in a perfect state until you decide that, okay, I'm done roasting. And then you're going to go through a scoring process in which one at a time you're pulling chips out of a bag and putting them into a coffee cup little area, trying to get the chips to add up to the perfect number. And that's just really fun, right? You can get these special abilities that will help you mitigate some of those draws. But you know, when you're roasting, you might be over roasting certain beans. And so you have these burnt beans in there and you're just hoping to get lucky and not pull them out. I just find that so much fun and so replayable. There's very few games that give me the same feeling that this one does. Give it a try. It might be for you as well. But anyway, that's my number 1 next step solo game, Coffee Roaster. So there you go. 10 great solo games to play if you're looking to up the complexity just a little bit. Which games did I miss? Please put them in the comments below. And as always, like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this content. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.